All right, Alexander, we may be hours away from Liz Truss being gone as the Ukraine Prime Minister. So we're recording this video at around 1:30 London time. So quite possibly by the time this goes up on the internet, Liz Truss may not be Prime Minister. Is that correct?
Well, she may very well have announced her resignation. It's possible that she'll cling on for a while as acting Prime Minister, as Boris Johnson did. What has kept her in office this week, the only thing that's kept her together in Downing Street over the last couple of days, is that the Conservative Party, the various factions of the Conservative Party, have been unable to agree on an alternative. Last week, it looked like it was going to be Rishi Sunak. It's now clear that there's a lot of resistance to Rishi Sunak. There's been arguments, quarrels. The government is disintegrating. We had chaotic scenes yesterday. Liz Truss has been avoiding the media. She's been avoiding the House of Commons. She finally came to the House of Commons yesterday. Keir Starmer, it must be said, the Labour opposition leader, failed to attack her effectively, which some people thought would give her a further boost because, that's more about Keir Starmer than anything else. But then the Home Secretary, who was one of her strongest allies, one of the most senior officials of the government, announced that she was resigning over a trivial affair that she sent a document through a private email server, shades of Hillary Clinton, but everybody accepts that this was a setup. It's clear that she was being picked off in order to isolate Truss. That's my own view, but that's I'm pretty sure of that. And then the other thing that happened is that the government had a vote yesterday in the Parliament over fracking, whether to allow fracking. It descended into total chaos. 40 Conservative MPs rebelled. Other Conservative MPs were prepared to rebel. They were literally manhandled, apparently, by government officers into the voting lobbies to vote for the government. There was rows, there was swearing, there was all kinds of things. And the long and the short of it is, it's now been decided that even though the Conservative Party can't agree on an alternative leader, it looks like there's a decision, or at least a consensus emerging, that she must go. I mean, that seemed to be the position last night, and we hear that she's meeting two of the top Conservative Party managers, Sir Graham Brady, who's in charge of the of the backbench MPs, and the Tory Party chairman, the Conservative Party chairman, today, and an announcement is now expected very soon.
Okay, so some of the names that I'm hearing as a replacement: Hunt, Wallace,
yeah. Wallace,
Sunak,
Wallace
I guess is still in the running,
absolutely,
and Boris,
and also this person Penny Mordaunt, whom I frankly admit until a few weeks ago I'd never heard of. So that gives you that is a good description of the range of people. It's a sign that nobody can agree on anybody. There's all the various factions are divided. Now, Wallace has done this mysterious dash to Washington. Nobody can completely understand why. He apparently can't speak to Lloyd Austin on the phone because his phone is being listened into. By whom precisely? The Russians, the Chinese, the Ukrainians, or perhaps rivals within the Conservative Party. So why has he gone to Washington at this particular time? Is it in order to get support for a leadership bid, or is it because he's trying to avoid getting drawn into a leadership bid? Who, anyway, wants to be Prime Minister with a government that's collapsing, a party that looks set to lose the election, that's desperately factionalized, and with the economy going down the tubes? I mean, you have to be an unusual personality to want to be Prime Minister when you know that you're going to lead your party into an election which is going to lose. But anyway, all these names have been talked about. There's no agreement about them. You have to be here in London to get a sense of how chaotic the situation has become. I said last week it was a plot. It clearly was a plot. They've succeeded in what they wanted to do. They've got rid of Truss, or rather they got rid of Kwarteng. They're about to get rid of Truss. The Remainer establishment is back in control, but it can't find someone to take charge until they can engineer the election when their anointed, their anointed one, Keir Starmer, is able to take over. So we have chaos, disorganisation. As of this moment in time, Britain has no government.
All you have to, all you have to be at this moment in time in order to successfully lead the UK, the only thing you have to be is a leader. That is it. Put the best interest of the population of the UK first, and just have enough guts to roll back the sanctions.
Completely true. So
It
true.
it is that simple.
Simple.
That's
Absolutely.
simple. That's all you have to do. Of course,
I know.
everyone's going to go after you, but that's all you have to do. Roll back the sanctions.
I know.
And you're well on your way to putting the brakes on this collapse. Comment on that. And my next question is very simple. Why not just have elections?
Well,
If you
indeed.
can't
Well, I
find a
mean,
replacement, take it to the people.
we could very well have elections. I mean, and that possibility is now a very real one. Starmer is calling for elections. It could very well be that the decision is eventually made that there have to be elections because the government is disintegrating. But do bear in mind, Conservative MPs don't want elections because many of them are going to lose their seats. And as one Conservative MP said yesterday, there is nothing more X than an ex-MP. In other words, it's ruin for many of them if there's an election now. So that is the one break that is preventing an election at the moment. But on the first point, which is the important point, you're absolutely right. That is the right thing to do. The trouble is, as must be clear by now, who leads Britain, and one has to put the words leads in inverted commas, who leads Britain is to a great extent decided not by calculations of national interests, but by the wishes of the political class, Britain's permanent state. And a political leader who comes forward and says that they want to do those very necessary things, those very simple things, which you outlined. The permanent class is going to make the political class, the permanent state, the deep state, if you like, is going to make absolutely sure that they're, one, never made prime minister, and two, if they do become prime minister, well, they're shuffled out of the scene within weeks or days.
What does it benefit the deep state to rule over a country that's falling apart and is breaking apart? I mean, even the deep state would have to kind of fall back to some sort of self-preservation and say, okay, pretty soon, if we continue along this path, yeah, we're going to be the deep state and we're going to control everything, but we're going to control everything of nothing.
Yes, I know. Okay, right. Well, we may come to that point when they start making those calculations, and that might not be, very far off. Could be in a couple of weeks, could be a couple of months. But at the moment, they remain committed to the policy. I mean, you're getting all their usual operatives. I know who, you can tell if you follow the media like I do, who they are. They're still writing articles in the newspapers saying we mustn't falter on Ukraine. This is still the party line, and these articles are very, they're very menacing. There's even an article today where one particular journalist who says we must actually extend the sanctions against Iran now, even go after Iran because they're siding with Russia against the West. So, these things are there just to warn people, don't even think of going to that place. But of course, needs must. In a few weeks' time, maybe it's different. I'm going to say this. Over the last couple of days, and this isn't just Conservatives, also Labour. The Labour Party, you'd think they'd be cock-a-hoop, looking forward to power. They're as depressed as everyone else. Over the last couple of days, since the weekend, in the weekend is when British MPs, politicians, meet with their constituents, the parties in the country, they meet with their voters, people of that kind. The British political class has finally started to understand how catastrophic the situation in Britain is becoming. So this mood of chaos and panic that you're seeing in Westminster at the moment is reflecting the sense of panic within the political class, that things are spiraling out of control, that the economy is spiraling out of control, that everything, in other words, is going wrong. So that's why you're getting all these warnings in the media. Don't even think of changing course on Ukraine, because perhaps, for all we know, there are some people, Sunak possibly, he's a clever man, people like that, who are thinking that this is the time to cause a change. But for the moment, that acceptance has not taken place. It would be a massive defeat for Britain, or at least for the political class who rule Britain, if they were now to change course. And at the moment, they're not prepared to accept that kind of defeat.
Right. So let's go after Iran as well. And might as well just throw China into the mix. Why not? Since the UK is taking on everybody, let's just throw China in there as well. Maybe Turkey and India too. Why why stop there? But what's going to happen to the political elite? What's going to happen to the political class when Russia begins this war? Because this is what I was thinking about this morning. The US and the UK, they've been the two biggest backers of Ukraine and the biggest backers of the escalation and the conflict. What happens when Russia really does start to fight this war, really begins what we think they're about to do, after the US and the UK over the past 7 months have sent so much money and so many weapons, only to realize that over the past 7 months, all this money, all these weapons was really just is lost. It went to nothing. All it did was fight a Russia that was in reality fighting a very limited special military operation. All of this money went to fighting a Russian army that was that was fighting a very small conflict. Now that Russia's going to really begin, what are they going to do?
Oh, indeed. On that topic, by the way, we got the strongest confirmation of all yesterday that the Russians are moving towards a full war. And that was the decision yesterday by Putin and the Security Council in Moscow to create what's called a coordinating council. In other words, a council to mobilize the civilian economy to support the war in Ukraine. That we've not seen in Russia up to now, but now that is a clear sign that this is cranking up to something massive, not just the limited war that you're talking about. When it happens, what does the political class do? They don't know. They are in absolute denial about it. They can't face up to it. There will be an even bigger crisis than the one we're seeing now. You're absolutely right. What you said previously, they should be telling themselves, we've got to change course now, before, say, mid-winter, when the real debacle, the real crisis is going to begin. But at the present moment in time, in the mood of hysteria and panic and confusion that exists in London, no one is looking that far ahead. What happens then? What happens midwinter in Britain? Well, I shudder to think. As I said, there's no enthusiasm in the country amongst the people for the Labour Party and Keir Starmer. There's complete contempt across the country for the Conservative government, which, as I said, is collapsing, as we're talking about. There's no way back for Boris Johnson, just touching on him. So what happens in a few months, I don't know.
Real quick, does the UK have the resources to keep on funding the Ukraine?
No, it
Do
doesn't
they have the money? Do they have
resources.
the weapons, or have they
No,
also been tapped out?
they're completely tapped out. And if you're talking about funding, Jeremy Hunt, the new Chancellor, has made it fairly clear. He hasn't said it so explicitly, but he's made it fairly clear that they're going to cut defence spending because they have no choice. So, I mean, the financial situation of the British government is catastrophic.
Anything else to add before we sign
Well,
off?
we live in very interesting times. I've said this many times. I've never known the situation in Britain to be so bad. And, you know, I went through the 1970s and all its horrors, and I've never known it as bad as this. I've never known the political class in Britain in such a state of panic. It's even worse than it was in the days after the Brexit referendum vote. So that gives you some idea of how bad it is here. They're running around at the moment like headless chickens. Everybody knows that Keir Starmer is going to become Prime Minister soon. Nobody believes that he has a solution to the problem. And the plotters who brought down first Boris Johnson and then Liz Truss and engineered, as I said, the return of the Remainer establishment back into power are probably now starting to realise the scale of what they've done.
All right, we'll end it there. The Duran.locals.com. Also find us on Rockfin and Duran Shop, 10% off. Use the code Good Day. Take care.